I'm Tracy Sabol. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, Super Tuesday, a possible turning point in the race for the White House as voters in more than a dozen states head to the polls for primaries. We have analysis from Philip Crowler with the Associated Press. Following the leader, with Senator Mitch McConnell stepping down, a look at the Republican lawmakers lining up for his leadership role. Prayer and fasting, how church leaders in France are responding after the Catholic country puts abortion in the Constitution. And music to his ears. An organ donation saves the life of a priest in Pennsylvania. We'll explain. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us on the Feast of St. John Joseph of the Cross. Our top story tonight, the race for the White House reaches a key milestone today. Super Tuesday represents the largest number of primary elections across the country. More than a dozen states and one territory are all casting presidential ballots. White House correspondent Owen Jensen begins our team coverage tonight. Owen?
Tracy, today's elections stretch from Alaska and California to Vermont and Virginia. Virginia is where I voted today. Got my little sticker right here to prove it. Now, hundreds of delegates are at stake, making this the biggest haul for either party on any single day. And the eventual winner in November, of course, gets to come here to the Oval Office.
President Joe Biden skips the campaign trail on Super Tuesday, instead holding an economic event at the White House. He's courting Americans with his plan to lower costs.
Prices are still too high, and they shouldn't be this high. That's why we're going to do everything we can to keep lowering costs for hard-working families.
Earlier, President Biden did encourage voters by tweeting, "Now is the time to make your voice heard." And across the country, that is what we're seeing today. Voters in North Carolina are among those going to the polls. And in Arkansas, Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders cast her vote.
This is a head-to-head matchup at this point between Joe Biden and Donald Trump.
Real Clear Politics currently shows former President Trump with an average 2-point lead over President Biden. But that is within the margin of error, meaning either candidate could still win in November.
My poll numbers, the last 5 polls you guys don't report, I'm winning 5 in a row.
And former Governor Nikki Haley continues campaigning for the Republican nomination, seeking support Monday in Texas.
Now is the time we have to have a leader who has moral clarity. We need someone who knows the difference between right and wrong, between good and bad.
Haley promised to stay in the presidential race at least through today, but her path forward continues to narrow, with Trump expected to sweep Super Tuesday states.
I want to win based on my policies are better. We're going to cut taxes. We're going to get interest rates down. You're going to be able to buy homes again. I mean, you can't buy a home today. The interest rates are so high.
And today, Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said that President Biden continues to prepare for his State of the Union speech this Thursday night. She says one of the topics he'll cover is, in her words, quote, reproductive freedom, end quote. The president will then hit the campaign trail after his address as the election kicks into high gear at the White House. Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
And joining us now to talk more about Super Tuesday is Philip Crowler, international affiliate correspondent for the Associated Press. He is in Charleston, South Carolina, where Haley's campaign is based. Philip, great to see you as always. So what is the mood there at the Haley camp today?
Well, it's been pretty quiet, but admittedly, she has been campaigning a lot over the last week in most of those Super Tuesday states, at least those where she thinks she might have a chance of getting some delegates, maybe even winning a state here or there. But essentially, all we've heard from the Nikki Haley camp today was a text message sent out to voters encouraging them in Super Tuesday states to head to the polls, with a video that again showed one of her basic messages, that a Donald Trump presidency would bring more chaos, more scandals, more legal problems, as she has said repeatedly on the campaign trail. There hasn't been a particularly defiant message from her today. As you've heard, there have been promises to stay in this race until Super Tuesday. Whether it's going to be past Super Tuesday, we'll have to wait and see, because these could be 16 losses for her in 16 contests on this Super Tuesday. She's, by the way, not holding an election night event, as tends to be the case for the main candidates. This is in stark contrast, of course, to what is happening in Mar-a-Lago in Florida, where Donald Trump will be holding what he expects is going to be a victory party.
Philip, any chance that she could pull off an upset here today?
Yeah, no, not really. The most likely outcome here is that the former President Donald Trump is going to win everything. That means 15 primaries, or rather 15 contests in U.S. states and one contest in a territory, that's American Samoa. He is the favorite in all of them. Maybe Nikki Haley can spring what would be a huge upset, frankly, by winning in the likes of Vermont or Virginia, for example, where there are more moderate Republicans, but it is very, very unlikely indeed. The momentum is simply not with the former governor of South Carolina. She's only won that one primary so far. That was in Washington, D.C. The good thing for her is she can now say that Donald Trump is not going to win the whole sweep of primaries heading toward the Republican Party convention. But it gave Donald Trump the possibility to call her the Queen of the Swamp by winning in Washington, D.C. and winning that primary alone so far.
Phil, explain to us why Super Tuesday, why it matters so much for both parties.
Well, it's just because of the sheer size and the numbers involved here in Super Tuesday. It tends to be a very important day in the election calendar. It is, again, by the numbers alone, the number of states that are voting. 16 altogether if you're looking at Democratic Party and Republican Party primaries, and then the one U.S. territory also voting. It's also about the delegates, of course, up for grabs, those party officials who will be representing those votes at the party conventions come the summer. It is over a third of delegates that will be up for grabs in both camps, in both the Republican Party primaries and in the Democratic Party primaries. Not enough, though, by the way, for us to be talking of a presumptive nominee at the end of tonight. Even if Donald Trump wins everything, even if Joe Biden wins everything, they still will not have got over that threshold for us to be able to say that they're definitely going to be their respective parties' nominees.
Quickly, we're almost out of time, but how is this Super Tuesday? How is it different from in years past, if at all?
Tell you what, it makes you a little bit nostalgic because usually a Super Tuesday where there is no incumbent is much more exciting. The last one was in 2016. And remember that the candidates then, or rather the nominees at the end, were Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, but they were still fighting it out in their respective parties to become the nominees on Super Tuesday. That, of course, is not the case here. I think this is a race that we can call more or less done and dusted at this point, and I think we certainly will be able to do so by the end of the night.
All right, Philip Crowler in Charleston, South Carolina for us tonight. Thank you so much. All right, now to the war in the Middle East. An Israeli airstrike killed at least 17 people in southern Gaza. Smoke is seen on the Gaza skyline amid reports that the talks on a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas ended without a breakthrough. Officials had hoped for a truce to be in place in time for the start of Ramadan next week. Today, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel will do everything it can to preserve freedom of worship during the Muslim holy month. In a new interview, the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem repeats his call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Cardinal Pier Battista Pizzaballa says both sides need to make compromises. The White House also remains hopeful that a truce between Israel and Hamas can be reached.
The hostage deal is in the hands of Hamas right now. Okay. Because they've been an offer, a rational offer. The Israelis have agreed to it, and waiting to see what the Hamas does.
And for analysis, we turn now to Bianca Adair, professor at the Catholic University of America and an expert on the Middle East. Dr. Adair, good to be with you again. First, tell us your thoughts on the negotiations in Cairo and what part the upcoming start of the holy month of Ramadan, what part that plays in these discussions, if at all.
Thank you, first off, for having me this evening, Tracy. And Ramadan is an interesting period of time because I've read recently most people are very concerned about Hamas's previous calls for violence during Ramadan. But I want to highlight there are really some terrific opportunities for Ramadan coming with respect to potentially the release of the hostages. If the United States will reach out and talk with Saudi Arabia and Egypt, there may be a way to talk with Hamas to have them follow what is a tradition, a Ramadan tradition of releasing hostages and releasing prisoners. And that would be a real sign of goodwill that could potentially build a little bit more trust between Israel and Hamas as much trust as you can build in light of what happened after October 7th or during October 7th and then immediately thereafter. So Ramadan has some opportunities, and there's some hope mixed in there.
Yeah, another story that's also making headlines is the White House visit of Benny Gantz, an Israeli war cabinet member and political rival that is, of Netanyahu. Can you take us through the invitation by the Biden administration, and what's the significance here?
Well, that invitation is one that's a little bit politically dangerous. The way that the Middle East works when it comes to politics is it operates in signs and deeds. And in this case, this is a sign to Benjamin Netanyahu that the administration's not particularly happy with his leadership, and they prefer to talk to Gantz. Gantz is, as everyone knows, he is considered a war hero. He is also very close to the security establishment. So the invitation that came and the decision to talk to Gantz is a signal to Israel, specifically to Netanyahu. And it's done at a period of time that's a little bit dangerous by virtue of the fact that there's a lot of questions about what's going on in Gaza and the current push into Rafah by the Israeli forces. So that decision to invite him had to have been done intentionally to send that signal, because you have many people in the administration that have been working in the Middle East for quite some time. But it is one where the United States has to be a little bit careful. Netanyahu, one cannot count him out. He has often come back when no one thought he would in periods of time leading to his leadership now. So Gantz, while he is a good leader and certainly has promise and is polling very high in Israel, the U.S. has to be careful not to meddle too much in the politics of the only democracy in the Middle East.
Yeah, and finally, before I let you go, where do you see, or do you see an end in sight anytime soon when it comes to the Israel-Hamas war? And do you think an agreement can be reached soon?
To be honest, I don't see an end in sight. Then the reason is Israel is dealing and having the worst type of opponent, and that is a terrorist organization that infused itself into the entirety of the Palestinian society. So that means that Israel truly has to eradicate it. And Israel needs its allies, the United States included, behind it to be able to do its job while trying to protect Palestinians. And those two things are so difficult right now. It seems unlikely to me that that war is going to end anytime soon.
Well, Dr. Adair, always good to be with you and get your insights. We appreciate it. God bless.
God bless you, too. Thank you, Tracy.
Well, a busy week on Capitol Hill. The race is on to pass 6 spending bills by Friday to avoid a partial government shutdown. Meanwhile, Senate Republicans are already jockeying for leadership roles inside the party after Mitch McConnell announced his plans to step down as the Senate's top Republican come November. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales joins us now with the very latest. Eric.
Well, good evening, Tracy. For the second time in as many weeks, lawmakers are scrambling to avoid another partial government shutdown, the threat of it. After months of averting shutdowns with 11th hour short-term funding gaps over the weekend, negotiators have finally reached a critical compromise.
A shutdown is a loser for the American people.
Top lawmakers working to pass 6 bipartisan appropriation bills rolled into one. The package will fund the military and veteran affairs, transportation, energy, housing, and the WIC program, providing needy families with assistance. House Speaker Mike Johnson celebrated the cuts to agencies like the FBI and EPA.
This is a bipartisan agreement in the end, but it sticks to the numbers, the agreement on spending. It does not go above that. It will increase a bit defense spending, but there will be real cuts to non-defense discretionary spending.
Conservative House Republicans and even Democratic leadership are skeptical a deal can be reached in time.
The second group of bills could be, difficult and problematic, especially as Republicans in the House continue to insist on policy riders that erode women's reproductive freedom.
Meanwhile, the race is on to replace leader Mitch McConnell, who says he's stepping down in November.
As we look at a new generation of consistent, principled, conservative leadership in the United States Senate that empowers our Senate Republicans, that puts a check and balance against the Schumer, what has been a very liberal Schumer-Biden agenda. I'm prepared to lead that effort.
Besides Thune, Senator John Cornyn of Texas announced his intentions in a statement, quote, "I am asking my Republican colleagues to give me the opportunity to succeed, Leader McConnell. I built a track record of listening to colleagues and seeking consensus while leading the fight to stop bad policies. But others want a clean slate." Is it time for new leadership?
I thought so at the start of this Congress. Okay? So my answer to that is an obvious yes.
Wyoming Senator John Barrasso was also thinking of throwing his hat into the ring as leader, but he ended up deciding that he wants to go for the whip position currently held by Senator Thune. Now back to the funding of the government. Talks continue on the second group of funding bills. Those include money for defense, health and human services, intelligence, and much more. Lawmakers have until March 22nd to pass that deal and keep the government funded for the rest of the fiscal year. Tracy?
Well, Eric, switching gears here, some big news regarding Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema announcing today that she is not seeking re-election. Did this come as a surprise?
No, not really up here to a lot of people up on Capitol Hill. We kind of suspected this. The independent senator had made a video on social media platform known as X saying that she is leaving the Senate only after one term. She says America remains very divided and compromise is not always a solution up here on Capitol Hill, and it was time for her to move on.
It's all or nothing. The outcome, less important than beating the other guy. The only political victories that matter these days are symbolic. Attacking your opponents on cable news or social media. Compromise is a dirty word.
Well, although she was an independent, she worked very closely with the Democratic Party, and you may recall that she was even part of the group that worked for months on the immigration reform when Senators Republican James Lankford and even Democrat Chris Murphy, they worked out a deal, but it was later thrown out after House conservatives, including Speaker Johnson, rejected it. Now, looking into 2024, the future, this race between now Republican candidate Carrie Lake and also the leading Democrat in the race, Congressman Ruben Gallego, it's going to be much more important to watch for control of the U.S. Senate come 2024. Tracy?
Okay, thank you so much, Eric. And we have a lot more still to come here on EWTN News Nightly, including terror at the airport, another round of gang violence in Haiti targeting more government sites, and the Vatican responds to France putting abortion into the country's constitution. Welcome back. Another round of violence in Haiti as heavily armed gangs tried to seize control of the country's main international airport. Gang members exchanged gunfire with police and soldiers. The goal was to prevent the prime minister from returning to the country. His whereabouts are currently unknown. The violence began after gangs attacked the country's two biggest prisons and released thousands of inmates. We turn now to Stephen Dessen, Executive Director of the Partnership for Church Reconstruction. He joins us now from Haiti. Stephen, good to be with you today. So tell us what you are seeing in Haiti. What's life like right now?
Things are very difficult to the point where we can say that the country's like, not really the country, but the West Department is in a state of emergency, which was declared by the government yesterday. Right now, after that suspicious attack that happened to Bishop Dumas last week, the situation has deteriorated after that due to the fact that Bishop Dumas was very vocal about the situation in Haiti. So with the deterioration that happened, it became a state where the gangs have taken control of pretty much 80% of the capital.
Stephen, how are you doing right now? I mean, do you feel safe?
Right now, not really. It's a situation that's really deteriorating within the capital. Right now, I really don't feel safe. It's just that the situation we're in the area that I'm at right now is not really attacked. However, with 80% of the capital being under the control of the gangs, the situation is deteriorating very much so. We have like about 13 projects which were under construction and out of the 13 projects, 12 have been on hold. And the kidnappings of the religious sisters, brothers, and some priests in some cases, and also some innocent bystanders that have been putting the situation in a tough corner where we feel like we're heading towards a dead end. We've also had looting of homes that have been abandoned by people who are running away from the gangs, and also we have the looting of the hospital of Saint-François de Sales, which is a hospital that has been rebuilt after the earthquake, and that also has been looted, which is very terrible due to the fact that we don't have that much hospital. And also, we also have the attack that happened in the main prison, where out of 4,000 detained prisoners, we have right now about 98 detained men left, which causes a major issue. So you have over 3,000, some detained, some also already convicted out in the streets, and it's causing really a dire stress on the main system of the government. And we've also have attacked on the airport, which is the main airport in the capital, where right now all in and out flights, commercial flights, have been canceled. So right now we're looking at a situation where the international intervention is mandatory due to the fact that if we want to avoid like a bloodshed, we definitely need some intervention that happen as quick as possible.
Yeah, and Stephen, I was going to ask you, especially what's happening at the airport. If people wanted to leave, could they even get out of the country?
Right now, there's no possible ways to leave the country because of the airport being all commercial flights being canceled, and all the main roads in and out of the capital, which is on the main road, national number 1, national number 2, national number 3. All of them have been controlled by gangs. So the capital is pretty much like surrounded by gangs, and there's practically no way out.
What a tragic situation. Stephen, before I let you go, what else would you want people to know about? What can we do?
I think right now I would call for the folks that are outside the country to pray for Haiti, and second, to manifest the will for the international community to help. Because right now we're at a situation where without the external help, the country will fall into a state of beyond emergency. We need to avoid the bloodshed. Those that are that have influence within other government outside the Haiti need to definitely intervene and ask for the troops that were already approved to definitely come and stabilize the country, because right now the situation is dire. We are asking the help. This is a mandatory situation in order to avoid more bloodshed.
Well, Stephen, we thank you for speaking to us about all this, especially considering the situation. We're praying for you and everyone in Haiti right now. God bless you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Up next on EWTN News Nightly, protecting life. The Vatican responds after France votes to enshrine abortion into its constitution. Plus, a priest in Pennsylvania receives a life-saving gift. On Friday, French President Emmanuel Macron will inscribe the right to abortion into the country's constitution. Following the passage of the amendment yesterday, the country's Catholic bishops are calling for fasting and prayer, and they called on the faithful to pray that fellow citizens will rediscover the taste for life. The Vatican also condemned the vote. EWTN Vatican Bureau Chief Andreas Tonhauser explains.
As France made the decision to include abortion as a right in its constitution, the Prime Minister declared, "Your body belongs to you, and no one has the right to control it in your stead." Tracy, I believe this could be a good time to also advise our viewers a little bit more on what the Church really teaches. God alone, we read in Donum Vitae, is the Lord of life from its beginning until its end, and no one can under any circumstance ever claim for himself the right to destroy an innocent human being. And just last week, also the French Bishops' Conference stressed that abortion remains an attack on life. It should not only be regarded from the perspective of women's rights. In a statement of support, the Pontifical Academy for Life here at the Vatican also agreed. Archbishop Vincenzo Paglia, he's the president of this academy. In his statement, he reminded us of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which protects life at all stages. And also France is, of course, a signatory to this declaration. Citing the words of Pope Francis back from March 2020, the Academy's statement explains how the defense of life for the Church is not an ideology. Defending life is a reality for Christians, a human reality which involves all of us, Tracy. And it's also connected to an attitude of solidarity, care, and acceptance. That's what Pope Francis said, and which we are all responsible for handing down to the next generation. That is the official statement for now. We'll bring you any news comments from the Holy Father as soon as they become available. And from past instances, we know that Pope Francis has always been very straightforward and direct when it comes to the protection of life. In Rome, Andreas Tonhauser, EWTN News Nightly.
And finally tonight, a priest in Pennsylvania receives the gift of life from one of his parishioners. Father Tim O'Sullivan of St. Ephrem Catholic Church was on dialysis for 5 years. He mentioned in the parish bulletin last fall that he was in need of a kidney donor, but none was found. Then the 46-year-old brother of a parishioner died. The woman looked on her brother's ID and saw that he was an organ donor. Father O'Sullivan received both kidneys and is no longer on dialysis. He hopes to offer Mass again in April. And we thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, X, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Tracy Sabol. Good night and God bless.